Hello everybody and welcome to part 5 of my FTC Programming tutorial video series. So in this video all we're going to talk about is the Gamepad. I've tried to record this video maybe 100 different ways at this point and I didn't like how any of them turned out. So all we're going to talk about the Gamepad in this video is getting information from the left and the right joysticks on your controller. So the Gamepad is what we use in order to get information from the controller into software so you can actually control the robot. Now there's a lot of buttons on the controller and you can do a lot of different things with them. All we're going to worry about in this video is getting information from the left and the right sticks so that we can move on to writing our basic driving programs. So the very first thing that we need to understand about the Gamepad is kind of the syntax of getting different pieces of information out of it. So unlike other objects, you don't need to import anything in order to use the Gamepad. It is there by default in every op mode program. And there's two different variables that are stored globally. There's Gamepad 1 and there's Gamepad 2. Now in FTC, you can have multiple drivers and Gamepad 1 and 2 will correspond to whatever controllers you have assigned to driver Gamepad or driver controller 1 and 2 on your driver station. So I'm going to use Gamepad 1 as that should be your default when you're first building out your driving program. The driver is usually always Gamepad 1. But as you add more things to your robot and things get more complicated, of course, add your second controller. So there's the piece of information that we're going to get out of the Gamepad is called a double or a floating point number. And all that means is it's a number followed by some decimals. Now, in the case of the left and the right joystick, it's going to be a number from -1 to +1. And all that means is how far you're pushing it left or how far you're pushing it right. So, for example, if we're looking at the left joystick Y value, pressing it all the way forwards is going to give us a +1 value, and pressing it all the way back is going to give us a -1 value. If we leave it in the center, the Y value is just going to be 0. And then, of course, however much we're pushing it forward or pushing it back, we'll get some number between 0 and 1 or 0 and -1 for how far we're pushing it forwards or backwards. So in order to get that information out of the left stick, it's going to look something like this, left_stick_Y. Now this naming is a little bit different than what we've seen before. This naming is called snake case. We at this point have gotten used to camel case. For example, with the hardware map, this is what we would call camel case, where the second word is separated by a capital letter. That is not how the Gamepad works. I'm not sure why that is, but it's just how it is. So for our tank drive, we're going to need two bits of information. We're going to need the left stick Y, and we're going to need the right stick Y. So here's how we get those pieces of information. Now, whenever we need to use this information, I always like to store it in a variable. And since this variable type that we're getting out of here is called a double, we're just going to store it in a double. Now, I'm going to name this something like LY for left stick Y. You can make the argument that that's a terrible thing to do and that you should come up with a different way of naming it, but for the purposes of this video, when our program is relatively simple, I think this will do just fine. So now we have our left stick Y value and our right stick Y value hold as doubles, which is just a number between 0 and 1 or 0 and -1, depending on how hard we're pushing either of the sticks. If you want more information about different pieces of information that you can get from the Gamepad, different buttons that you can get and different values, you can look at the documentation page. I'll cover more in depth different things that you can get out of the controller and how you can use them inside your program in future videos when we get to some more advanced topics. But for now, that's all you need to know in order to build out a tank drive or mechanism drive teleop program. So with that, we will move on to writing our first teleop program.